Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, which is a lawyer's guide to the metaverse. We promise you we're going to take you on a journey over the next hour that it may be more familiar for some and less familiar than others, but you're going to learn about the metaverse and you're going to learn what it takes to travel through that. You know who I am. I'm the president of the Beverly Hills Bar Association. I'm Malcolm McNeil, and I'm also a partner and international co-leader for my firm, ArentFox Schiff. And I'm very, very pleased to have with us today Dan Jasnow. Dan will be the presenter, and he's put together an excellent PowerPoint in order to guide us on this journey. Outside of the metaverse, Dan has a very distinguished practice because he's my go-to person when I have questions regarding branding, product development, IP, consumer electronics, cryptocurrency, you name it. If it's a modern high-tech area, I turn to Dan for guidance in connection with those areas. Dan works out of our New York office. I'm in the Los Angeles and San Francisco offices, and Dan has stylized himself as our go-to person for the metaverse and has helped us to become the first law firm to be actually having real estate, as that term is defined, on the metaverse. There's a press release that came out, I think, on October 31st, if you want to hear more about how service organizations can benefit from the metaverse. But at this point, I'd like to say welcome, Dan. Thank you very much for taking time from your schedule to talk to our BHBA members today.
Thanks, Malcolm. It's great to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the membership.
And again, thanks. But let me, I have been getting queries from overseas and curiosities from clients and other lawyers, frankly, who have been asking me questions about terms that are somewhat vague for some of us. The terms are, I think many of us or all of us are probably familiar with Web 1, and then Web 2 becomes a little bit more tricky, and then Web 3 becomes even trickier because I've seen some commentators use the phrase Web 3 in conjunction with the metaverse. And as I'm reading those, I'm not sure if the writer is confusing me because of their great knowledge or if they're confusing me because they're a little bit murky themselves. So why don't we start with you giving us a little overview of that world in order to orient everyone?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think you're right that there's a lot of murkiness in general. I think there's a lot of disagreement about what these terms mean. I really think about Web 3 as being any part of the internet that is built on blockchain. So these are mostly peer-to-peer, decentralized networks that reside on distributed server platforms. If you compare that to Web 2, which is, I think, the easiest way to understand it, Web 2 is all about sort of big tech. So you have Amazon web servers that host all this content on the internet. You have Google, which runs all the searching and ad infrastructure. You have Meta. You have the big social media companies, and that's really sort of concentrated power infrastructure within big tech, mostly in the U.S. Web 3 is sort of a response to that. It's saying we're going to create a web framework that is decentralized, that is distributed across a large number of web servers, that's not controlled by any particular big entities, that is trustless and permissionless, and that is more resistant to censorship, and that gives participants a much greater amount of control over the intellectual property in there. We're going to get into that a little bit. I know these terms are sort of hard to really grasp. The metaverse is a sort of bridge between those. It's not necessarily all Web 3. Not all metaverse platforms are built on blockchain, but some of them are. Some of them are more traditional Web 2, built by large video game developers, similar to what your kids may have played.
Okay, well, with that, I mean, that's fantastic. With that, why don't we just launch into it? I don't want to take any time away at this point, and I'll say, if anyone has any questions, you can put those questions in the webinar chat. We're not going to really take those questions during the course of this because I really want Dan to get through the entire presentation, and we'll take the questions at the end as they come up. So Dan, I turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. I am just going to share my screen here. And hopefully you should now be able to see that.
It says that you're screen sharing, but I'm not getting the vision there.
My Zoom quit unexpectedly.
Oh, no. There we go.
There
We
we
can see it
go.
now, Dan.
Okay, great.
I thought we were going to have to tantalize our listeners. You were going to have to, and viewers, and you're going to have to do this all ad hoc. So here we go.
Yeah. Okay. Hopefully we won't have that happen. So technology is always still a problem. But okay, so Malcolm already gave us a great intro into the topic. But the first thing I really want to do is try and drill down a little bit on what exactly are we talking about with the metaverse. And this is, really sort of the way that I think of it. You will hear different descriptions, different definitions of the metaverse from a lot of different quarters. People do have very different notions about what the metaverse is. I think it's helpful to think of it as the immersive internet. This is a term some people use. And that really means we're talking about augmented reality rather than virtual reality. What's that mean? So augmented reality is, imagine Google Glass, which was way ahead of its time 10, 15 years ago, where you had sort of a computer that was, that you were wearing on your face. It overlays a digital layer into your physical reality. We're not talking about disappearing into a headset or sitting on your desktop computer and, sort of forsaking your physical world. We're talking about blending the digital and the physical. And then, at heart, why is this important for the type of people that we as lawyers work for? It's a huge e-commerce platform. There's already a lot of e-commerce that's happening in the metaverse. There are platforms that we will talk about where this is happening. And it's a huge revenue opportunity, especially for companies with really valuable IP, including publicity rights. So with that being said, let's take a look at what that actually means. And again, this is an example of the immersive internet. So this is a video from Adobe, the software maker. This woman wakes up, she puts on glasses, and then she's in her actual bedroom, and then she's presented with her daily calendar. This is a little virtual dog that greets her in the morning, and it has all sorts of utility. So she can select music from her podcast. She can, again, look at her calendar. So this is augmented reality. This is not virtual reality. We're not disappearing again. We are bringing the conveniences of your phone to your physical reality. But that, of course, doesn't exist yet. That is sort of the aspirational notion of what we are building toward. And I think what a lot of companies see the metaverse as, but we're not there yet. But we are getting closer. And this is a couple examples. The next few slides are a couple examples of what we've seen in metaverse applications that have been really interesting recently. This first example is from Accenture, the consulting firm. And some of you may have heard, they recently onboarded 150,000 employees, new employees, through a metaverse experience that they built themselves. So, and think about this, not necessarily as would you rather be in person for this, but this experience was taking place previously during the pandemic on Teams. So there are news reports, there are videos of these new employees, mostly right out of college, who are saying, I'd much rather put on a Quest headset, the headsets that you see here in the video, and experience this through my avatar than sit on a Teams meeting for 8 hours a day where I'm just seeing squares of people's faces all day. So we're not necessarily trying to replace the physical. We are, at least Accenture's vision here, I think, was that we are trying to improve the virtual conferencing experience that we have today through things like Teams and Zoom. This is another example from the education industry. This is Fisk University, which created a cadaver lab in the metaverse. And it's used in order to, a purely educational experience in order to give students the opportunity to really get to know sort of musculoskeletal anatomy and to, have an experiential component regardless of where they're located. And that provides a lot more capability than, their physical location may have been able to, especially with remote learning. Here's another example more in the sports and entertainment space. Manchester City in the UK has created a digital replica of their Etihad Stadium. And this is, a way for them to really connect with a global fan base. There is all sorts of sort of premium content that is available through this experience. So you go in there, you can watch behind the scenes footage from before and after games, and you can watch the actual games for the Manchester City team, within this sort of immersive virtual experience of the stadium. Interestingly, the Atlanta Braves have also done something very similar with their ballpark. And then this is, as Malcolm said, this is the ArentFox Schiff Metaverse office. This is in a platform, which we'll talk about a little bit in a second, called Decentraland. And as you can see, we're in a section of Decentraland that is called the Fashion District. It's sort of the Rodeo Drive of the Metaverse. And everything that you can see here, as we're going through this video, is a three-dimensional virtual, fashion experience. This is Dolce & Gabbana. You've got all sorts of other major brands here. And, why did we pick this? Because we have a lot of fashion clients. We do a lot of work in this space. A lot of clients were coming to us and saying, hey, we want to be in this space. Can you help us with this? What do we need to think about? And we said, well, the best way for us to really understand this is to do it ourselves. So we purchased a parcel in Decentraland, and then we built this office building, which is a three-dimensional rendering. You can go in there, we can have conferences or at least social events. There are privacy considerations, so we're not doing anything that's attorney-client privilege in there, but it's really an opportunity for our clients to have a space here where we can potentially, host receptions, as well as to show that, we understand this space, we've been through this, and we can help you with any issues that you might encounter. So how are we going to get from, these examples, which are mostly desktop based, or you have to be wearing a headset, to more like what we see in the Adobe video, the truly immersive experience that blends physical and digital spaces and that brings your phone really, into your physical reality. What we're seeing is a lot of movement in the consumer electronics space. I spent 6 months on secondment at Meta Reality Labs, which is sort of the heart of Meta Inc.'s, augmented reality, virtual reality division, looking at consumer electronic products from a marketing legal standpoint. And, what you're really seeing at Meta, at Apple, at Microsoft, at Google, is an effort to push forward with some of these most advanced wearable devices. So in this example, this is wrist wearables that track your electromyography, so that basically it learns how you type on a keyboard and allows you to type, as this person is doing, on any surface, just by tracking your hand motions and your electric neural signals. So that's one thing. We're getting rid of the notion of controls, of having to do the touch screen, and instead we're tracking brain signals, essentially. This is another example. This is the latest device. This is the Meta Quest Pro, which was just launched a couple weeks ago, that for the first time really lets you have this sort of immersive experience at a consumer price point that is, it's still a little bit expensive, but it's not all that expensive. In this example, the user here is using their hands to manipulate these digital objects. They're playing this puzzle game, but they're still in their physical environment. Somebody could walk up to them and they'd be able to see them and talk with them. So all of these things are showing that we are, I think, getting closer, and we're starting to bridge the gap between, the current metaverse experiences and something more like the Adobe experience. So now that we've looked at that, we've looked at some examples, let's take a step back and talk about, drill down a little bit more on what exactly is the metaverse, what is Web 2 versus Web 3. So again, these are sort of, these are the terms as I think of them. And I really want to share sort of this notion because I think it helps conceptualize it. I'm not going to go into the tech side of it. because it's, hard to digest for most people, including myself, and I just don't think it's that productive. But if you think about blockchain as like an operating system, and again, this is a very rough analogy, but if you have an iPhone, everything on your iPhone, it operates on the iOS operating system. And any third-party app developer can come along and can build an app and can upload it into the Apple App Store. Apple will review it and determine if your app can go live on the iPhone, and then anyone else can come and download it. Blockchain is similar in a lot of ways. It's an open system, most of them, the public blockchains. It's a digital ledger that records information chronologically and that can be built upon. So any third party can come along and build an app on a blockchain, taking advantage of the unique properties of blockchain. So just like I could build an app for my iPhone, somebody can come along and can build an app for blockchain. But instead of having to go to Apple and say, hey, Apple, can I upload my app? You can essentially just deploy it on blockchain without any permission from the third party, entity that has created that specific blockchain. So you might hear the term DApp. That's just a decentralized app. It's an app that lives on blockchain. Many of the metaverse platforms that we're going to talk about are DApps. And they utilize NFTs often in order to convey ownership rights in digital assets and to show that an asset is unique. Smart contracts is a term you might hear. A smart contract is really just the software code that determines the features and characteristics of the NFTs and the dApps. They may or may not actually have any sort of legal character as a contract. In many cases, it's just a much broader term. And then quickly, we're not going to talk too much about these, but decentralized autonomous organizations are sort of a new type of organizational framework that's essentially a blockchain-based governance mechanism. It's really just a sort of a group of people that's come together that develops a charter or a software protocol that lets them make decisions collectively. So metaverse platforms. I think one really important thing that often gets lost is that right now, when we talk metaverse, we're talking about specific platforms that exist that you can go to on your computer right now as I'm talking, and you can access them. Some of them you need a blockchain wallet in order to do that. That's essentially sort of your access key to the blockchain, but anybody can go and open up a blockchain wallet on something like MetaMask or Coinbase wallet. So when we're talking about metaverse, we're referring to these platforms. Decentraland is one of the biggest. Sandbox is one of the biggest. Fortnite Horizon Worlds, which is a 3D platform from Meta. And they come in two general varieties. And this gets back to what Malcolm was talking about. They come in on-chain versions. So those are what we would call Web3. And then they come in off-chain versions. Those are what we would probably refer to as Web 2. At some point, these platforms may sort of come together and be, the one true metaverse. They might allow for interoperability, where I could go, spend an hour in Decentraland, and then I could pop over to Horizon Worlds, and I could bring, digital assets back and forth, apparel that I purchase or whatever. A virtual home that I create, our virtual office, and I could go from one to the next without interference, but at the moment that's not quite possible. So the Web3 version of these platforms, the on-chain metaverse platforms, these are environments that are built on a blockchain. In most cases, they're built on the Ethereum blockchain. And again, what does that mean? It really just means that these are applications that have been built on this sort of blockchain operating system, just as my Gmail is built on the Android operating system on an Android phone. So, but because they're on a blockchain, they have unique characteristics. So they're decentralized. They're largely unscripted, and they're for the most part player owned and controlled. That is in contrast to the off-chain experiences, which is the Web 2, the traditional sort of tech stack, which are for the most part scripted and controlled by the game developer. And again, let's drill down on this piece a little bit. So in Decentraland, if I go in there and I build a virtual home, I can go in there and I can hire a developer to build and design a virtual home for myself, and then I can have that developer place it within real estate, digital real estate that I own in Decentraland, and I will retain all of the intellectual property rights to that digital design. I'm not going to give Decentraland a license to use it or to redistribute it or to make derivative works. And for the most part, Decentraland is going to say, I want nothing to do with the virtual home that you build on our platform. We don't try and control it, etc. If I go into Horizon Worlds, I'm mostly going to be restricted to using the software tools that Meta, as the developer for Horizon Worlds, makes available to me. Or if I go into Roblox, I'm mostly building with the tools that Roblox gives me. And Roblox, Meta, any of these other big video game studios that have built metaverse platforms are exercising a significantly more control over the platforms than these decentralized experiences, these blockchain-based experiences. So there's a huge difference, especially from an IP side, between the on-chain Web3 versions and the off-chain Web2. They both have their pros and cons. I'm not saying one is better than the other. There's a lot more engagement right now, for the most part, in Web2. But Web3 has these unique qualities that allow for true ownership of digital assets, where transactions are recorded on a blockchain and you have a more robust property interest in those digital assets. So what are the legal considerations if we're going to actually, jump into these worlds and start doing business for clients? First thing is, this is a huge IP gold rush. We think of this period of time as very similar to the early era of the internet, the 90s. And, there's obviously, we can't know where this is going to end up. And we're not saying that, it's necessarily going to, remain the same, that any of these platforms are going to succeed. And as if you're watching any of the news, there's a lot of instability in the crypto market in general. But what it's safe to say is that this blockchain infrastructure, the more immersive, augmented reality nature of these platforms, those are characteristics that we expect to become more integrated, more prevalent within the internet that we all work with on a daily basis. So as companies, big brands are preparing for this transition from Web 2 to Web 3, they're doing a number of things. They are registering their core brands for goods and services in a virtual environment. Many of them are doing due diligence on their copyright, licensing, franchise agreements, publicity agreements, to make sure that they have the rights that they might need, or the level of control over their IP that they need in order to leverage it in this new environment. They're registering blockchain domains, and they're purchasing virtual real estate. So trademark filings, this is an example of one that we filed for FILA. And again, we're mostly filing for core goods and services for use online or in virtual worlds. That might include non-fungible tokens, but it's not necessarily NFTs. And for the most part, it's the digital version of your goods or services. That's class 9. Retail store services is often one where you're selling these virtual goods in an online marketplace. And then the entertainment aspect of this, which is obviously significant. But there's still, a question about, is it really necessary to register, say if you are Nike, do you really need to register Nike shoes in class 9, the virtual version? Or is it sufficient that you have a registration in class 25, which is the core apparel class. That's still an open question. I think, if you're a big brand, you could probably take some comfort in knowing that your existing registrations will provide some protection, but always better safe than sorry, and make sure that your brand is protected by filing for these additional metaverse related uses. Another key piece here is the user generated content. So as I mentioned above, Web3 is unique for its ability to create true ownership of digital assets. That is largely by virtue of the blockchain, which records, pretty much every transaction that happens in the metaverse or on a blockchain in chronological order. So if I purchase digital real estate in the sandbox, then there will be a ledger record in a blockchain that says Dan purchased this digital real estate on November 9th, and then on November 10th, he sold it to Malcolm. And nobody will ever be able to go back and delete that ledger entry. That will be there permanently, and the digital assets that are the subject of those ledger entries will pretty much stay there indefinitely. That quality, the true ownership of digital assets, also extends to user-generated content, which is obviously going to explode in this digital environment. We already have a ton of user-generated content on social media, where we've seen a lot of monetization opportunities for influencers, for brand ambassadors who are really turning themselves into their own brand. But in this case, you might have that applied to an avatar. You might have that applied to somebody who is immersing themselves in a new environment in order to do a performance or to sing or to put on a fashion show. And so there's a lot of opportunity there. We expect that UGC is going to be a big area of litigation as well as opportunity. And there's a really interesting difference between how the platforms are treating them. As I mentioned, if you upload this content to Facebook, pretty much Meta, the parent company, is taking a license in that content and getting the right to make derivative works, translate it, modify it, etc. In Decentraland, they don't try and do that. The DAO that runs Decentraland basically disclaims all control over the content as well as all rights in the content. You keep the rights. We don't want anything to do with it. And that's, it's an interesting play. It really sort of epitomizes the differences between the platforms and means that businesses, celebrities, artists who are engaging on these Web3 on-chain platforms have a lot more leverage over their content. So publicity rights, what does it mean for publicity rights? We have a long string of cases in the US that publicity rights extend to digital avatars, digital likenesses. There have been a whole bunch of NCAA cases involving NCAA professional or amateur athletes. There was also a really interesting case involving No Doubt, where they were in a sort of banned video game, Guitar Hero type of thing. And the court said, yes, your rights extend to these digital replicas. We're already seeing a number of artists who are leveraging those rights in the avatar space in order to, create new licensing opportunities for their names, images, and likenesses. This coming week, actually starting tomorrow, there's going to be a music festival in Decentraland that is being headlined by Ozzy Osbourne, and he's going to be performing in avatar form. Paris Hilton recently hosted an event in the metaverse. Snoop Dogg is all over this. There's a huge opportunity for savvy artists, celebrities, musicians to monetize their name, image, likeness rights in avatar form. And we're even seeing some versions of this that are true to life. So you may have seen Bruce Willis, who was recently diagnosed with aphasia, can no longer really speak, licensed a real life avatar a digital replica of himself for a commercial that was produced and I think aired in the UK. So, presents a huge opportunity for celebrities to be continuing to monetize their name, image, and likeness, even if they are, no longer active in the industry. It does, also raise the infringement question. So if we are, we represent a lot of fashion brands. We do a lot of agreements with models, photographers, and for those types of entities, you have to really be thinking about, what are my authorized uses for this content that we've had in the can for the last, 3 years. Maybe we have 2 more years of authorized rights to this, but did we get, strong enough digital rights that allow us to deploy this in a virtual experience like the sandbox? We're seeing a lot already of video content popping up in the metaverse, including, fashion reels and, fashion shows. So as a brand, really important to be thinking about, do you have the rights in order to repurpose the content for that purpose? If you're the artist, model, etc., do you have somebody that's looking out for, your NIL rights, that is tracking these platforms, making sure that nobody is infringing the content that you have licensed out. Another important area in the publicity rights arena is influencer disclosures. As I mentioned, obviously influencers have become a huge part of social media. It's likely only to increase in the metaverse. But the FTC, the U.S. Federal Trade Commission, has already weighed in and said, as has the SEC, and said that if you are going to be endorsing something in a metaverse platform, whether an avatar or photorealistic rendering of yourself, you need to be really careful about the disclosures. You're still obligated under state and federal law to make sure that nothing you're putting out there is misleading or that is omitting a material connection between yourself and a company or brand that you are promoting. Kim Kardashian paid a big fine to the SEC for failing to disclose a financial connection with a cryptocurrency that she was promoting. Another interesting area in the copyright space is how it aligns with artificial intelligence. Settled law in the US has said that copyright vests in the creator or owner of a work, but that you have to have substantial human authorship in order to do it. I love this photo, which is a famous photo in the copyright space. This is a macaque monkey that stole a photographer's camera while the photographer was on assignment, took this photo, him or herself, and then PETA, on behalf of the monkey, sued for copyright infringement. Unfortunately, the macaque lost. The court said, no, you have to have a human involved here. And the interesting part about this is that it's been extended into the AI space. So a purely AI created work does not qualify for copyright protection because it lacks human authorship. But what about a situation where we have AI contributions? Recently, there was a case in the US where an artist who created a graphic novel used a software program that was an AI, a program that utilized AI, but only in part to create this, this graphic novel. She was initially successful at getting copyright protection from the US Copyright Office, but they subsequently followed up and said, oh, wait, we may have made a mistake here. We're going to, cancel your copyright registration unless you can show that there was substantial human authorship. This is an ongoing case. It was just late breaking news, but it certainly shows that the Copyright Office is really struggling with how to draw the line here and what the nature of human authorship actually means. So another really important consideration when dealing with these platforms, especially the Web3 on-chain platforms, is jurisdiction. So I think, we've really taken for granted in the last 10, 20 years that most of these big tech entities are US based companies that are, unquestionably subject to US law, for the most part, US law compliant. You can argue over, some elements of that, but, they're subject to the Digital Millennium Copyright Act notice and takedown procedure. They are, entities that you can pretty easily assert jurisdiction over if necessary. A lot of these metaverse platforms are offshore. So popular jurisdictions are Panama, Cayman Islands, BVI, Hong Kong. And so we're, starting to grapple with the reality that a lot of these social type platforms are no longer necessarily strictly or easily subject to US law. So as a IP lawyer, that means I need to think about, are they going to comply with a DMCA notice and takedown request? If I come into one of these platforms, which we have had happen for a client, and I see that they have, put up a work that is copyright protected, will they take it down if I write to them under a sort of DMCA process? There are, a lot of jurisdictions follow similar DMCA type notice and takedown for copyright infringement, but not all of them. And, that's, I think, going to be a big question as we move forward. What types of remedies do we have available? And, where do we need to go? Where do we need to sue in order to, force them if necessary? Another area, also in the jurisdiction context, is in the franchise and license agreement context. So if you are, where we see this most often is big, global companies that might have a headquarters in the US or in the EU that controls most of the IP rights, but they might work through master distributors or master franchisees, master licensees in various territories around the world. And each one of those territories, each one of those subsidiaries, licensees, et cetera, has a license to use the IP. But what does that license say about their ability to deploy the IP in the metaverse when, this is largely a borderless technology that you could, essentially argue exists anywhere? Big brands are going back and saying, let's do a due diligence review of this, or when this comes up for renewal, we need to be thinking about, making sure that we have enough control over our licensees, franchisees' use to be able to prevent them from doing unauthorized metaverse, applications. Blockchain domains are, really interesting area here. You can sort of draw a parallel between blockchain domains and traditional web domains. So, if I were to register danjasnow.com, you could go use that to go to a website that I put up. I can also go and register danjasnow.eth, which is a blockchain domain. But instead of being able to use it as a web address for a website, you can actually use it. I can use it to send and receive cryptocurrency. So I could also potentially eventually use it as similar to a website, but for the most part at the moment, people are using them to send and receive cryptocurrency because it's a much simpler process than other methods of sending and receiving cryptocurrency. The problem here is that a lot of these domains have already been snatched up by cyber squatters or people that are trying to hold these domains for ransom, essentially. And unlike traditional web domains, which can often be recovered through a UDRP process, which is administered by ICANN, the international body that oversees web domains, there's no process to recover these for the most part from these infringers. So we're really encouraging brands to go out to see what has been registered, what hasn't been registered. And if this is an area where you think you might have any interest, then to snap them up and make sure that you have them. Some of the domains are subject to a brand protection program, but not all of them. And there's otherwise very little recourse. Finally, in the purchasing digital real estate space, as we mentioned earlier, this is something that ArentFox Schiff has actually done and gone out and purchased real estate. We've advised a number of other clients who have made this jump as well. We're seeing a lot of interest, even with prices way down, of clients who want to be in this space, who want to show that they're savvy in this new sort of e-commerce platform experience. And, you know, our role as lawyers has mostly been to help them vet, you know, those transactions, to help them understand what the differences are between these platforms, as well as what the legal differences are depending on the nature of the underlying technology. Are they Web 2, Web 3? Are you going to have, are you going to retain rights to anything that you put up there? Are you going to be, you know, basically taking a license from a video game developer? And then, you know, a lot of companies are thinking about, you know, we want to be in the platform where our customers are. So that might affect the decision about where they go. Interoperability, you know, are we going to be deploying on a platform that is really pushing toward this sort of one true metaverse thing where, you know, the digital assets might have more value long term because people will be able to move back and forth? Or are we going into sort of a walled garden where it's unlikely that we'll be able to, you know, have interoperability in the future? And then ease and cost of development and governance issues. You know, what are the rules of the road in these platforms? That's still often determined by terms and conditions and other key sort of consumer-facing documents.
Dan,
yeah.
let me interrupt just for a second, because I said we will save the Q&A till last, but one of the questions was particularly interesting to me, and that is, we have a question that says, you said you bought a space there. Is that an actual transaction? Can you sort of give us the nuts and bolts of what a transaction looks like?
Yeah, so if you purchase space in a on-chain Web3 platform like Decentraland, the Sandbox, Other Side, Somnium Space, you are essentially engaging in a transaction, a purchase of an NFT, a non-fungible token. So that digital asset, so the NFT is tied to a digital asset. So in the case of one of these metaverse platforms, essentially each platform has a map, and it, you know, the map has coordinates. Each parcel within the map has, you know, a unique identifier. And then the token says, you know, Dan is the owner of this unique parcel within the map. And that transaction can happen entirely on blockchain, which makes it a trustless and permissionless operation. So you basically go onto one of the marketplaces. It can be OpenSea, which is the largest NFT marketplace, or it can be on sort of Decentraland's marketplace. And you say, okay, this is the parcel I want. It's for sale. I'm going to send you crypto, maybe to your blockchain domain. And when I send you the crypto, I will automatically get the rights to the NFT. I'll get control of the NFT. That transaction can also happen traditionally through contracts. We've actually worked with companies who have purchased NFTs, real estate, through traditional papered agreements. The control of the NFT is still transferred via you know, via blockchain, but the funds are transferred off chain and usually in fiat currency rather than crypto.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. There's a couple of related questions, but let's go.
Yeah,
on.
we could jump to the questions.
Okay. Can you read the questions, or I will go through them?
Yeah, no, I can read them.
Okay. Well, Michael Sohigian also asked, what are you calling it? Decentraland? What is Decentraland? I know what it is.
Decentraland is one of the metaverse platforms. Decentraland.org. You have the spelling right there. It's in the Q&A. And anybody can go in and join. You, in order to take most advantage of the you know, functionality within the world, you need to have a blockchain wallet, which you can get from MetaMask, Coinbase wallet, and that's essentially, just as I said, sort of your ticket to enter. but anybody can go and can participate.
And it says, what is your favorite blockchain? Ethereum, question mark?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say I have a favorite. Ethereum is by far the biggest smart contract enabled blockchain. So the two behemoths in the space are Bitcoin and Ethereum, but Bitcoin is really just a cryptocurrency. It's much more difficult to build on Bitcoin as opposed to Ethereum, which allows for sort of these third-party developers to really come in and build really robust applications. So Ethereum is sort of the most popular one. That's what a lot of these metaverse platforms are built on. But there are also private blockchains, which is a solution that a lot of enterprise clients are looking at for, you know, when they want to take advantage of some of the utility of a blockchain without having to deal with transaction fees that can sometimes be pretty significant, or with you know, public access to data.
Jeff Kachavin asks us and says, as most of the online environments are being built through Ethereum, will this affect the value of Ethereum? Any opinion on that?
Yeah, I mean, you know, in the industry, they talk about total value locked. Each one of these applications brings more value, locks more value into the Ethereum ecosystem, the Ethereum blockchain. I think, you know, especially post, for those of you who have been closely following the crypto news, Ethereum went through a merge in September that changed the way that they validate information, made it a lot more efficient, and will theoretically increase significantly the number of transactions that can be processed, you know, per second. All those things, you know, really weigh in Ethereum's favor, you know, in the long term, in terms of, you know, continuing to be a major player in this space.
And Joy Arnell Sason asks, does the catch-all language of a quote future technologies clause unquote in a grant of rights sufficiently cover rights in the metaverse?
I think it could. I think you'd really want to look at the agreement, and you know, what we're trying to do for a lot of clients is just make sure that things are really clear. If the client has a strong, you know, business interest in metaverse, and it, you know, it depends on you know, the nature of the agreement. So in if you're taking a copyright license, or if it's a work for hire and you're saying, you know, we have the right to use it, you know, in all future technologies, or, you know, whatever technology now known or hereafter developed, you know, that might be sufficient. If you're talking about sort of a prominent celebrity or model who exerts very strong control over the use of, say, photographs or behind the scenes content or video content, then, you know, you might hear from them, you know, if they are, you know, surprised by a particular use of their content. So, you know, I think it really depends on who the two parties are, what your plans for the copyrighted content is, or are, and then, you know, making sure that the parties are in alignment.
Andy Anderson is asking us, what are the tax implications for participants in these environments? How is the value they accrue through digital assets being tracked, and how is it enforced? Yeah, so
there are significant tax implications. I'm not a tax lawyer, but I can say that, you know, generally, anytime you sell cryptocurrency, you have a taxable capital gains event. And that is, you know, that's a significant issue, especially for a lot of companies that are taking cryptocurrency onto their balance sheet. You also have to mark, you know, declines in value for crypto assets, crypto holdings, which is a significant issue. So, you know, in a huge bear market like we've been in, companies that have major amounts of crypto on their balance sheet are having to mark that all down to market, and are not able to mark it back up if there's a change in the value. So that has significant accounting implications for companies. There are also reporting obligations, or there will be soon, for crypto payments in excess of $10,000. So there's a lot to consider. It is, I mean, we could do a whole other presentation on tax and accounting considerations. We have been working with a bunch of companies, and ArentFox Schiff has been, trying to consider how best to manage its own crypto holdings and what the accounting and tax implications of that are.
We have a question down here that says from Mary Demasift, excuse me, Mary. For influencers who want to get on Web3 Metaverse early, how and where should they, I'm sorry, how and where should they be creating content? Have you seen some good examples I can look at?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on the platform. I mean, you see some folks out there. Well, so like the examples I mentioned earlier, Paris Hilton has hosted an event, a digital version of herself, an avatar, has hosted an event in Decentraland where she was a headliner. That's really more of a sort of, performance for her. Ozzy Osbourne as well. Kim Kardashian that's maybe an example of what not to do, has posted a lot about cryptocurrency, so promoting others' products that she got in trouble for failing to disclose. But I would say, just to take a look at it, you can go into the sandbox, you can go into Decentraland. Those are options, and you can, sort of wander around some of these events where, for example, there's a music festival happening starting tomorrow that has 200 artists at it. I'm sure there'll be influencer type activity going on there. You can also look at Roblox. There, even if you just Google Roblox Nike Land, you should be able to find the very, significant metaverse platform that Nike has created in partnership with Roblox. And there's all sorts of, athlete participation in that. So, there are a lot of different options. It really depends on sort of the nature of the influencer's appeal, where they want to be, what type of products they're promoting, because each platform has a different sort of client base or customer base.
One of the initial questions we had was from Alan Shimp, and it says, why would the AR interface be more convenient than doing the same thing on your phone? I might have an answer, but I'm going to toss it to you and then see if we agree.
Well, I'm happy to defer to you if you want to tackle it first. But, I think a lot of these things are about, getting your chin up, instead of looking down at your phone all the time, looking up, seeing something through your glasses, maintaining eye contact. And also, a big part of it is, voice activation, being able to manipulate things with hand motions so that you're not having to sort of scroll through, your phone browser or whatever. You're really, information is much more at your fingertips, and ideally more accessible. Maybe that's not going to be the case. It might be an enormous distraction. People didn't like Google Glass 10, 12 years ago. So that might all go by the wayside, but I think, there's a lot of momentum behind sort of these next generation AR products that I think we'll see the fruits of in the not too distant future.
Well, I was good. Yeah, and I quite right. And I fully agree. I was going to refer Alan back to one of the initial images that we looked at, was the young lady waking up and putting on her glasses and seeing her virtual puppy and riding the bike and so forth. It would seem that would be certainly much. I've ridden my bike with my phone in my hand and crashed into a garbage can. So there are those advantages too that might be.
Yeah, but on the legal side, consumer product safety, products liability, it raises all sorts of additional considerations. Privacy, obviously. Meta also came out with, you may have seen some ads for the Ray-Ban Stories, which are Ray-Ban sunglasses that have a little camera right on the facing outward that can record short videos and take photos. They put a red light an outward facing red light to show the public when the camera is being used, so that they didn't have issues with people being filmed surreptitiously. So lots of privacy type of considerations along those lines, as well as consumer safety.
I had I mentioned to you when we were talking offline preparing for this that we have a very vibrant entertainment section within the Beverly Hills Bar. And I have celebrities or other notables come to me once in a while asking questions saying, what should I do to monetize myself? You've hit on a little bit, but if somebody comes in with a very basic question like that, such as people know me and I want to get on the Metaverse and I don't want to be left behind, what is our initial advice to them?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a number of options for those types of individuals. One of them, and one that we see, I'd say most common, is if you have an archive of content, whether that's photographs, video, etc., you can monetize that through NFTs. So you mint NFTs that are maybe collectibles. Each one is maybe one of 10 or one of one, and then you can sell those on a marketplace and make money that way. The NFT market, though, has fallen a little bit, quite a bit. And so, the value of some of those NFT transactions is maybe less than it was about a year ago. The other really interesting area where I think, we're likely to see more is in the sort of photorealistic avatars. There are companies that are building photorealistic avatars for celebrities, actors, etc. And those can either be deployed as influencers within, a metaverse platform, or in traditional commercial or even television or film content, where these are getting so good that they can really replace the physical actor. So lots of opportunities if you have valuable IP, whether that's publicity, trademark, copyright, to leverage that in a new forum.
We are at the end of our time. We haven't gotten to all of the questions, but I will end with one here that was asked by Joey, and that is, how long will the Metaverse gold rush last? If my client isn't in the Metaverse in 3, 6, 12, or 18 months, will it be too late? And I'll sort of follow up on Joey's question and say, do we know? Is there any good way of predicting?
Yeah, I don't think we necessarily know. There are a couple of things that I think I would recommend doing sooner than later if you have interest in doing it. And that is taking a look at your blockchain domain availability. There are a couple different platforms where you can buy blockchain domains, see if they're available. And if they are, maybe, snap those up. Some of them are not expensive at all. Some of them can be pretty expensive. Maybe look at trademark registrations if it's an area that's of interest to your client. And beyond that, I mean, the space is rapidly evolving. So, if you don't get into it in the next 12 or 18 months, I think there's going to be, there's going to be a whole new, set of platforms to talk about in 18 months that you'll be able to get in whenever your client is ready. So, I wouldn't rush it, but always good to be proactive.
Well, I said there's only one more question, but now we have a half a question. The last question here for the day is, what are your go-to sources to keep posted on the development in this field?
Yeah, that's it's a question I get a lot in these presentations. And honestly, Twitter is great. It's been through a little bit of a lot of publicity recently that's not related to the quality of the product, but there's a lot of activity on Twitter about crypto. Essentially, what I usually say is, if you find somebody who's a big player in the space and you follow them, and then you can look at who they follow and follow those people, you can really just keep following people until you get a stream of information that matches your interests. Another place that's sort of just very good background information is the Ethereum Foundation. I think it's ethereum.org. They have a lot of great educational content about Web3, blockchain, blockchain domains, what are these things? And pretty much every platform in the Web3 space also publishes its own white paper. So if you Google Decentraland white paper, you'll find a PDF. It's not that long, maybe 20 pages. It just sort of explains what it is they're trying to do, what the underlying technology is, and what their vision is. And those are a great resource that are just available on the internet.
Dan, with that, I will let you go. It's been a great journey through the metaverse, and we're right at time right now. So I thank everybody for hanging in there with the You haven't lost very many participants, so you did keep everybody riveted.
Great, that's good to hear.
Thank you so much for being here, and I appreciate everyone who has participated. On behalf of the Beverly Hills Bar Association, thank you. On behalf of the firm ArentFox Schiff, I thank them for making Dan available here. And for those of you who may not be members of Beverly Hills Bar, consider joining. Thank you all and have a great rest.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Thanks again. Bye-bye.